TPTV.
My guest today on TPTV is a hypnotherapist, a media coach, a former BBC producer, and now the host of the highly popular Mumbelievable podcast. I'm delighted to welcome to the show Sonia Beldom. Sonia, it's great to meet you. Thank you for coming on the show. You've had such a varied and incredible career, from being a top BBC producer to hosting the excellent Mumbelievable podcast, and you talk about the real and honest side of family life, I suppose is the best way to put it. But your story is also about turning out possibly a tough childhood to a message of hope, which is inspirational, and I think something that we can all definitely learn from. But first of all, can we maybe start with that brilliant title, Mumbelievable? Where did it come from?
Well, literally, when I was little, my mum was always doing crazy, mad things. Now, if you look back, you think, oh, wow, she was so ADHD and she had all sorts of other issues, but we didn't know that at the time. And so basically what would happen is in my youth, I'd go, Mom. And then somebody said, your mum's unbelievable. I said, yeah, she is. She's Mumbelievable. And that made people laugh. And so I used that all the time. And I used to use it with her as well. And I'd say, oh, Mum, my Mumbelievable mum, look what you're doing now. And she would laugh. So I think the word sort of stuck from a young age. And that's how the podcast came about. Because originally it was a blog site I did. When Mum was finally sectioned, she was 80 years old, 80. And she'd been in and out of all sorts of problems all her life, really. But when she was finally taken into a secure care home, because she was becoming a problem for herself and other people. She wasn't out, doing anything criminal, but she was just out of control. Her filter had basically dropped off. And but she was finally sectioned. So I started blogging about her because we started having these fantastic conversations, because I suddenly realized how ill she'd been. I was told exactly what was wrong with her, although I think they threw the book at her as far as mental health conditions. She was diagnosed with 6 mental health conditions, and I think it's because they didn't quite know which one was the right one. So they thought, no, let's just call everything. And then from that, a very good friend of mine said, why don't you do a podcast? And at the time, it's 2 years ago now. I thought, well, I'm really busy. Can I commit to a podcast? Who would listen? I mean, who cares about my story, really? I'm not anyone famous or whatever. But then it turned out, so we started doing 6. We thought we'll have 6 episodes and see what happens. There were some interesting people, but then it grew and it grew. And so in the end, he said, what are you going to call it? You're going to call it Sonia's Mum, the podcast. I thought, well, no one's going to listen to that. I know, let's call it Mumbelievable, because it sort of works in 2 ways. It's like a Mumbelievable story, and she in herself was a bit Mumbelievable. And also it's a kind word. I ask people, say, why was your mum Mumbelievable? And people tell me everything from, sadness to uplifting. So it kind of works. And it's copyrighted as well.
Oh gosh. So that's the one thing I was going to start off with is asking you, when people tune in, what can they expect from the show?
Well, it's basically well-known people and sometimes not particularly well-known people talking about their own mothers. And I compare notes with the funny stuff about my mum. We talk about mothers, the influences that their mothers have had on their lives. So it's a different way into a biography, basically, by talking about how they grew up, what their mothers were like, what legacies they've handed down, habits, all that. It's light-hearted at its heart, because a lot of the stories I tell about my mum are incredibly funny. But they're not always ha ha ha. It's basically saying it's a coping strategy for me to turn them into funny stories. But for a lot of people, they're very upsetting and difficult. So we're quite deep, actually. We go into a deepness of what a mother's influence can be on a person's life, for the good or the better, funny and tragic, all sorts. It covers all sorts. So it's basically looking at these incredible women that gave birth to us, whether we know them, whether they're still alive or not, and what that influence has done to make us who we are.
You mentioned coping then, and I think that that's something which, and you mentioned humour, and I think that's the way that possibly some people deal with things, and to look back at things with a light-hearted attitude is a way of dealing with something which I suppose was quite traumatic at the time. But what have you actually learnt, maybe that perhaps you didn't realise, from now speaking to so many different people?
Absolutely, lots of lessons. Well, the thing I've learned a lot is that at the heart of all my mum's sort of crazy antics, I'll go into a couple later, um, was absolute pure love and support. And I suppose what I've learned is that when I was younger, I was making all these stories very funny for myself to cope, but actually, the implication of what my mum did was really far reaching, and I hadn't really clocked it. I spoke to a wonderful chap called Julian Joseph. You probably heard of him. He's a jazz musician, and he was saying, I was telling him the story about how my mum uh, lied to me all the time. Basically, she'd make up these stories, and she said, "Oh, you can sing. You're going to sing for Cilla Black one day." And I thought, oh, okay. And then I was doing little ballet dances, or you're going to dance for Margot Fonteyn and the Queen. But then I thought, no, I'm not. Mum being, no, it's just stories Mum's telling me. And I was telling Julian this. He said, listen, Sonia, your mum gave you ambition. Your mum was telling you in her way that you could do anything. And you've just swept it under the carpet as a funny story. And actually, I don't think you ever believed that in yourself. And I thought, oh wow, that's a real eye opener for me, because it's true. I was a very skeptical little girl. I didn't believe grown ups. I thought, nah, teachers, head teachers, oh, well, they're going to tell me what to do, but it's probably a fib, because that's what mum does. I don't trust grown ups. And so I thought, gosh, I really did make a very negative rule for myself when I was very little. And it probably ran me, actually, Tim, for many, many years, up until quite recently, until other people said, and that was wonderful. I go, no, it's my mum being silly. Ha, ha, ha. Funny story, funny story. They go, no, 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 no. Actually, look at it properly. And especially, I was talking to a professor of neuroscience, Professor Catherine Loveday, who's absolutely amazing woman. And she said, no, she said, you know, your mum was doing what she could to mirror what you were doing when you were little. So you were always, you know, dancing around and singing and being the entertainer, taking away the attention from your mum, so that you had the attention on you rather than it being on her. And she said, but she mirrored back to you what was going on. So she made these stories that sounded funny and lighthearted and fluffy, because that's the way you were behaving. Uh, oh, that's extraordinary. You know, it's so yes, I've learnt a lot. I've learnt a lot about making the wrong rules for yourself when you're little, and how that can actually really impact your life. And how, even though mum isn't here with us anymore, she died in 2018. But even though she's not here, you know, pretty much every day I'm sort of almost having a conversation with her in my mind, thanking her for the lessons she gave me, because I've really learnt them. I think one day I said, I'm fed up with all the silly stuff she used to make us do. Like we go and meet weird people and spend days with odd families that we didn't know. And it was like when my parents divorced, so we had the sort of the weekend mum, you know. And I said, I'm fed up with all this. I want to do something else. I want to go fishing, because I thought fishing would be good, because you sit on your own by a pond for hours on end, not having to talk to anyone. I thought, that's what I want to do. So she said, okay. So what she did was she made this fishing system, which was basically an old coat hanger, and it had a pair of tights attached to it. So like a sort of net, but it was a tight pair. I was like, oh, this is not what I meant. And I was about 9, I think, at the time. Like, Mom, this is not what I meant. Come on. She said, come on, we're going fishing. I was like, not with that, we're not. She said, yes, it'll work. And we went to the Welsh Harp, which is a big reservoir in North London. And I was like, well, there's loads of people here. I can't sit here on my own all day. So I was basically starting off like, here we go, mum doing the wrong thing, taking it in the wrong way. Anyway, we had the best day because, of course, things would flow into this pair of tights. And we go, oh, look, there's a little fish in here. And we loved that. And then there was little wiggly worms and all sorts of things. And we had the best day. And I remember thinking, sometimes my mum does what looks like the wrong thing, but actually it turns out really good. And she couldn't have afforded a fishing rod. Of course she couldn't. So a pair of tights and an old coat hanger was brilliant. And I've done it now with my nephews. This is what my mum's got me. And you just sitting going, no, Auntie, what another one of your mum things? I go, try it. And we had the best time. It was great. So she was an inventor as well as so very creative. But,
There are alternative ways to do things. I read that the sort of the whole podcast, and I'm not sure whether it was a blog at the time, really took off after you spoke to, was it Jeremy Vine?
Oh, yes. Yes, that was amazing because in my old job in telly and radio, I got this wonderful job of casting all the celebrity teams on Celebrity Eggheads. And so I had to find, I don't know how many teams, 20 teams of 5 people. I had about 3 weeks to do it. So it was pretty full on. Anyway, Jeremy, of course, presents Eggheads. And so while I was up in Glasgow recording with him, I said, oh, look, I'll do your social media because he was so busy. I said, look, I'll do the social media for the show. I'll put everything on social media. So then he did a bit of background. He went, oh, I didn't realize you wrote this blog about your mum. I was like, yeah, well, it's a bit of catharsis for me. He said, it's really interesting because Jeremy Vine had also written a lot about his own mental health struggles and relationship with his mum. So it resonated with him. Anyway, so that was the end of that. And then it was Mother's Day 2 years ago. And he phoned me up and said, would you like to come on radio too? We're thinking of doing a Mother's Day, but we don't want to do hearts and flowers and chocolates and everything pink. He said, we don't want to do that. We want to do something slightly more interesting. Would you come on and talk about growing up with a neurodivergent mum? Yeah, brilliant. It's only a 6-minute piece, he said, 6 minutes. Went on to Radio 2, where I used to work as a producer. So it's lovely being on the other side of the microphone. And so he said, like, about 6 or 7 minutes. Anyway, 40 minutes later, the phones lit up. People were ringing in, and he was sort of miming to me, put your headphones on. I was like, why? He's, and I was taking phone calls from listeners who had come listening to the programme. Oh, yes, very funny story about Porridge and turning up in a wig and all the silly stuff Mum did. But then it got to the heart of how you can really look at the person and see the struggle they went through and appreciate that and look at life in a very different way. And all these people ringing saying, I have spent my life being cross with my mother, and I now realise that maybe she had similar issues to your mum. And people were really, offloading. And my website, my blog site, it's only an amateur blog site, it crashed completely. In fact, the girl who looked after it for me phoned me and said, I'm so sorry, your website's crashed. I said, crashed? She said, yeah. We've been spammed. We've had nearly 500,000 hits, she said, in one morning. It's obviously some horrible viral scam. And I said, oh, no, I've just been on the Jeremy Vine show on Radio 2. And it just showed that's really how the momentum got going for it. And it was a huge. And so the lovely thing about that was that after having been on Jeremy's show, we'd only done about 6 or 7 episodes by that point. Pretty much anyone I said, like, I've just been on the Jeremy Vine show, they go, oh, yes, I'll do it. So we got these fabulous guests, people like Ainsley Harriott, Helen Lederer, David Baddiel came on. He was fantastically funny. I made David Baddiel laugh. That's like, oh, I have won in my life now. I've made a comedian laugh. So it took off from there, really. So thanks to Jeremy, he was fantastic. He was always a big champion of it. And when I said I'm starting the podcast, he was like, best of luck with that. I'm hopefully going to go on his 5 show to talk about it at some point. But yeah, so he's been a very driving force, and he's backed it up, which has been brilliant. Who better?
Exactly. Well, we're recording this a couple of days after Mother's Day, and obviously people are thinking about their relationships with their mums. Some have absolutely wonderful memories, and some maybe have more complex sort of memories and experiences of their mothers. With your guests coming on, without actually naming any names and things, can you give us some insights into the experiences that perhaps some of them had?
Well, they've been very, very different. I'll mention David Baddiel because he's written a book about his mum, so that was lucky. His mum was very lively, vibrant. She was obviously neurodiverse, like my mum was. In fact, we thought our mums were probably separated at birth. Um, and he discovered things about his mother he had no idea about when after she passed away. A lot of people do that. They said, "I've just found things about my mum I didn't know about." And my message about that is always, well, it's a shame that that happens so late in your relationship. So your relationship with your mother continues even when they pass away. But have these conversations a bit earlier. We had a lot of people say my mum was brilliant. She backed me up and she was fabulous. One person saying, and Bobby Crush won't mind me telling you this, Bobby Crush, the pianist, said, my parents were so brilliant. They did everything for me while I was heading the headlights in One Opportunity Knocks and he was on tour with everyone. He said, but the trouble is they did so much for me. He said, I'm hopeless now. He said, I can't iron, I can't cook, I can't do anything. Oh, never too late to learn. He went, no, I don't have the confidence. So that's one thing. And then we had another, again, I won't go into who this was, but if you listen to the Mumbelievable podcast, you'll find out. A very well-known TV gardener who said that, first of all, he said he'd love to come on. Then he decided he didn't want to, too painful. And then he listened to the podcast and said, actually, you're quite a gentle, safe pair of hands. And let's give it a go. If I don't like it, you don't have to put it out. I said, no, absolutely not. Absolutely. Let's try anyway. And he revealed for the first time that his mother was a violent mother and picked him out from his siblings and was always beating him up, hitting him. He went to school sometimes with cuts on his face and bruising. And it turned out, we had a long chat about it, and he said, I don't understand. He said, I do not understand why she picked me out. And I said, well, you're anything like your mum. And he said, well, yes, we looked very, very similar. I said, well, I wonder, because my mum was beautiful, right? So she was 5'1". She had long ginger hair. She looked like Shani Wallace from Oliver, who suddenly got all sorts of now. But look, she's suddenly become famous again. She looked like that from Oliver. She's really pretty. But she had a very bad image of herself. So she didn't like herself very much. So when my poor brother was born 2 years after me with ginger hair, looking like her, she basically rejected him because it reminded her too much of herself. And so I told this story to this gardener, and he said, I think that could have been what happened. I said, she would have been, no mother is going to pick out a child and be violent to a child. I mean, your mum absolutely loved you. You know that, don't you? And he said, well, Mum, I don't know. I said, well, she looked after you. She fed you. She gave you clothes. You didn't go to school without shoes. And, so he said, yeah. I said, but she would have been struggling with herself, I think. I'm not a psychologist. I mean, I'm a psychotherapist now, but, I'm not an analyst. So I can't sort of diagnose people. But I think your mum had a very low opinion of herself. And because of that, when you were born, you reminded her so much of herself. It was almost like she was beating herself up in a way. Maybe. I don't know. That's just my opinion. And this light bulb went on in this guy. And he said, I've never thought of it like that before. So well, maybe you can ease up on yourself now because this isn't you really having been picked on. Obviously it feels like that, but actually she was picking on herself more than she was picking on you. And he said, it was about 3 or 4 months after, and he allowed me to put this episode out, and it's painful, painful one. But he said, my relationship with my mother is just, he said, she's dead now. He said, but I absolutely love her, and I love her for what she did, and I understand her now, and I can have a better relationship. Yeah, you can improve your relationship with someone even if they've died, by thinking about them in a different way. So that was really powerful, that one. Um, and then you've got the other ones where they had a mother who just made them laugh and was goofing around all the time and forcing people to buy tickets to go and see a show that this lovely woman was in. I was going, oh my God, my mum, every time we go out, my mum's going, buy a ticket. Here's a ticket. Come and see my daughter. So it's lovely. So it's a real mix, and it's the poignant stories really do get people because that's where we learn, isn't it?
Has there been like a universal truth, something which has been hiding in plain sight that you hadn't really noticed, which sort of connects everything?
With all the podcasts,
Yeah, where,
uh,
with all the stories.
I think all the stories are basically the profound love that is at the heart of any relationship with a mother and a child, even though the behavior might be difficult or tricky. Um, at its heart, that relationship is so strong. I mean, even a relationship with, um, and he'll have been on the press a lot about this, Andrew Pierce, the politician.
Yeah.
He wrote a book about trying to find his birth mother, and it was a very sad story. And Anyway, they found each other, but then the mother just want to know basically, and so that's his angst. But then even that we talked about. I said, but even then, you see, she did love you incredibly, and her way of coping with having to give you up as a teenage mother in a difficult, family was putting you in the hands of someone who could look after you better than her. I mean, that's love at its heart, isn't it? Really, that's the ultimate love.
Yeah.
And he said, "Oh, I hadn't really thought of it like that before." I said, that's the universal truth, I guess. No matter, I always say to people when I'm talking to people about, I'm a hypnotherapist, as I said, and a psychotherapist. I talk to people about healing a relationship with a parent. And I say, it's legitimately fine to really hate, loathe, and abhor the behavior, but you can still love the person. Think of that person in their best outfit, in the best possible sunlight, in the nicest situation, being the best they can possibly be, best smile on their face, all that. And then you can put the behavior in a bubble, and you can move that around if you want to. You can burst the bubble and let it all sit there, or you can waft that bubble away. But you can separate the two, so you can always love the person, unconditionally love that person, because they're your mother. But you can hate the behavior, and that's fine because sometimes behavior is unforgivable. And I realised that in my mum, I never felt safe with her. And that was the problem, I suppose. And but the problem being immense when I was little, but actually, if you turn it into a funny story, it's fine, not a problem anymore. It's funny. Um, but it's
Yeah.
that safety aspect, as long as kids feel safe, as you well know from being a teacher, they can operate in a much better way. So that I often say that with guests. I said, "Now, did your mum make you feel safe?" Yeah. But even though she did crazy things? Oh, yeah, yeah. I think, okay, well, that's the key point, I guess, in a good relationship. Someone lets you feel safe, secure.
You've said that your childhood was full of what you call chaos and fierce love. I love that. A that's a great way to describe it. Because of your mum's unpredictable mental health. Um,
Yeah.
so you've just described a few things there about the feeling unsafe or things were unpredictable. But so, what was a typical day sort of like when you were growing up?
Describe that. Well, I can tell you a couple of examples of the sort of chaos, things that have stuck in my mind for the last 50 or 60 years or whatever. um, Uh, Mum was, and I've talked about this a lot in the podcast, that she was a terrible cook. I mean, just dreadful. Just wasn't her thing, and so occasionally I would be. So quite often I'd be picked up from school by a complete stranger. No idea who they were. I think, oh, okay, who she got to pick me up today? Imagine that today, Tim. Honestly, strangers turning up to school. No. Anyway, so go to a stranger's house and cooking food that felt, oh, okay, this food's okay. But am I gonna, is the other child, will they put salt in it? But I must, and mix it up. And there was a lot of jealousy with other kids because suddenly they've got this new child in their family home, who's this little girl? So quite often there was sort of stress there. Um, but one day this wonderful family did porridge and it was wonderful. I love this porridge. It was wonderful, sweet, milky porridge. I was like, oh, please. So I said to Mum, can I have porridge? She went, yes, okay. Oh, at last, something I can eat. But she made it with water and salt. Now, I know that's the traditional way of making porridge. If you're a shop putter in Glasgow, however, so it was horrible. So I didn't eat it and refused to eat it. And she turned up to school that day, and so the class was going on, and and then everyone runs to the window and starts giggling. I went, oh no, I know what that means. And there's my mum walking across the playground, very determined look on her face, holding something. Oh, no, now what? Then I'll just disappear in a corner and start singing and dancing and trying to distract everyone. They would not be distracted at this occasion. The door flies open. In comes my mum, plonks on the table at the front my bowl of porridge, and says, I want Sonia to have eaten this before she gets home. And flies out again. All the kids laughing. Teacher completely and utterly flummoxed, didn't know what to do. She was very young. She was probably a trainee, 19, 20. This teacher burst into tears, and I ended up saying, it's okay, Mrs. Pierce. I know what to do here. Let's do this. And so I was guiding her into coping with the situation by getting her to say, if we scrape most of it away, Mum will think I'm eating it. Leave a bit in the bowl, though, so it looks bit. It'll be fine. Are you sure, Sonia? Are you sure? I went, yeah, that'll be fine. But your mother's, oh dear, I don't know. I know. So that was that. So I was dealing with my mum. And then there'd be other times when, if Mum did ever pick me up from school, which was rare, but if she did, we'd be marching around for ages. And I'd go like, this isn't the way home. I don't understand. Literally walked two blocks to the school. We'd now done about 10 blocks thinking, what's going on? She was looking for churches that had weddings going on. So, and if there was a wedding going on, she would literally march me up to the wedding party, stand me in front of the bride and groom, and demand that they take photos of me. So you've got all these pictures, probably the late all these weddings going, who's this child? Who is this person? And there's this little girl going, why am I here? It was hilarious.
But you can imagine 40, 50 years later, people are looking at the wedding photos and saying, and who's this?
Who was that? Yes, exactly. Especially in front of the bride and groom, really like that. Oh, did they have a secret they never told anyone? Oh, dish. So that sort of thing would happen. And she'd just be in a pro. We'd go to the park and she wouldn't just let me play on the playground. She'd sort of find another child and march them up to me and make us be friends and do things together. And, so there again, there's a child going, well, I want to be on the seesaw. Why am I having to play with this horrible little girl? I'd be going, I'm sorry, yeah. So all those things really set up this kind of, people say to me, the fact that you haven't turned into some kind of addict and sort of sitting rocking in the corner all day is a miracle. I said, well, I don't know, because I did love my mum. I mean, I wish her better all the time. I knew she wasn't right. I mean, I knew she was different. And I knew that there was a faulty gene, I suppose, there. But I did love her, even though at the time I felt legitimately put upon. So to answer that was a very long way of answering your question. There was never a typical day with my mum. If there was ever a day when sometimes I'd lie and say, oh, I've been told I can walk home on my own. And the teacher would say, okay, off you go. And off I'd get home, and there was a key so I could let myself in. Sometimes Mum would arrive. She'd obviously panicked because she didn't know where I was. But she'd have another child with her, some other child. And I'd say, well, who's this? And it turns out that my mum used to look out for kids from other broken homes, right? And sort of bring them in and give them dinner and do a really sweet thing. But what she didn't do is tell the parents that's what she was doing. So then you'd have the knock on the door and the police would be there saying that you got a file here. And oh, yes.
Goodness me.
Yes. So that was the sort of fierce love in that she would sort of, she would do things that were very loving, but actually the implication of them was a bit devastating. So,
Well, my next question was going to be, did she do things at the time which you now realise was actually a sign of her love, which you thought were just, you couldn't understand what she was doing in the moment, but now you can, with reflection?
Well, one of the things was I'd wake up in the morning and there'd be some woman at the door and she'd take me off for the day and I'd be with her family. And I thought at the time, oh, here we go again. Mum doesn't like me. She's giving me to someone else to look after. I'm obviously a problem because why would she do this unless I was a problem? And But then looking back in hindsight, I think, oh, it's because the reason that happened is that she was aware that she was about to have an episode, or she just could not cope. And rather than be with me and cause me even more problems, she put me somewhere safe. But she put me with people who she thought could love me and look after me better. So I look back at that and think that was absolute love at its heart. Um, and there was a lovely story much later on in life. My mum never, she was the most creative person. But she couldn't focus on anything. She could have been a writer. She wrote beautiful poetry, but fragments, you'd find little fragments of it. Um, Anyway, so she never had much money. So she was retired. She was still living at home, still doing mad stuff. And she was in Littlehampton and I was in London. So whenever anything kicked off, I'd have to take this 2.5 hour journey to go and sort it all out and all that. Anyway, I'd had in the freelance world of telly, as you know, and radio, I'd had a couple of contracts fall down. So I thought, oh no, I haven't got much money for the next 2 or 3 months. So I phoned my mum and said, look, I'm ever so sorry, mum, I can't come down and see you this weekend, literally, because I literally don't have the cash for the fare. Do you mind? She went, no, of course not, no problem. I said, it's just that I'll come down in a couple of weeks' time. Okay. 2 days later, a little purse arrived in the post, and it was her purse, a little silver purse. And inside it was £3.84. I remember this. I said, oh, what's going on? If she leave it somewhere, maybe my address is in there. I wasn't sure anyway. So I phoned her up and said, Mum, I've got this purse here. She said, oh, yes, it's £3.84. She said, well, yes. She said, look, my pension comes back in on Monday. That's what I've got left, and I thought you could use it better than me. I thought, oh, how selfless is this woman? That is so touching. And so that £3.84 has never left that purse.
Sonia,
Still have it.
I'm listening to you and I'm finding it quite emotional just hearing those stories because you're smiling all the way through it. But do you get moments where you look back and it really it grabs you emotionally as well?
It does. It does hurt. Yeah, it can. Because, I mean, when she died, she declined quite rapidly. 2 years, she got quite severe dementia. When she died, in a way, I was thinking, this is a good release for her. I'm in a way, end of life was natural and maybe, well, apart from anything, stopped me having to be constantly on call. Um, I was devastated when she died. I mean, I was surprised how upset I was, to be honest. I don't think I stopped crying for like 2 days, literally. Every time my husband was like, a cup of tea, I go, oh, lovely, cup of tea. And then, "Whoa." And I think it was emotion for a lost life because she was so amazingly creative and beautiful spirit deep down and mixed up. And I thought, what life did she actually lead? What an amazing job she did, really, considering how unwell she was. And what could her life have been like? And that hits me. And occasionally now, when there's a bit of a noise outside in the road, oh, this road's too noisy, or someone walks in front of you and you nearly trip up and you get cross. They go, oh, no, no, no. None of this is important. What's important is remembering the beauty of my mum's soul, because she had a fabulous soul. And that does, although I don't weep in the same way, I just think deeply about her and I think she was amazing. And those moments of calm, um, I think that's a gift as well, because say the laughter and the smiling was the default, and I'm so used to doing that all the time. People are, oh, Mum's hilarious. Um, but sometimes I think, do you know what? It's just nice to remember her for who she was and the amazing job she did. Um, and it's really sad that she wasn't able to do the things that she should have done. But on the other hand, I had her in my life and she was wonderful. And I think I sometimes look down and I think, oh, my mum, where's my mum? You know, Mother's Day's just gone, you know, oh, mum, I love your mum. And then I look at my hands and I look at my hand and I think, oh, that's my mum's. It's my mum's hand. That's what her hand looked like. That's how she held things. That's how she would write with a pen and things. And I think half of me is her, half of this hand is my mum. And isn't that a lovely, comforting thought?
Oh,
And
that's
so,
exactly what I was going to say. No matter how much chaos there was, that look where you are now and look what you're able to do. And that was all down to what your mum gave you.
up to her. And she gave me a fascination. I mean, I used to laugh about it, say, oh, our mum loved these films with complicated women, you know, that Play Misty for me and Fatal Attraction. Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. Obsessed by films about women, but complicated women. But that's what, because I was obsessed with my mum, obviously I wanted to know why were people like this? And that led me very neatly into training more in the psychotherapy side of things, because of thinking I have a real understanding of a confused way of thinking and the wrong rules that children can make up for themselves and all that stuff from personal experience. So it's interesting now being able to apply that professionally and give a bit of insight and to see other people healing when they start thinking about life in a slightly different way. Just that's all we need to do sometimes, isn't it, Tim? When things upset us, how can we reframe that in a way that makes it understandable, give it authenticity, appreciate it for what it is, but also be able to move on and learn from it? Because if we don't do that,
I know that there was a significant moment when your mum was, I think, 80, and you had a conversation with her. Can you tell us a bit about that, please?
yes, that was amazing. So with all the chaos of mum, really for about a year, it was constant. Every 2 or 3 weeks, I'd have to go down and rescue her from, police had taken her in or whatever. And then she was finally arrested because she was threatening this gang of kids in the park with a toy gun and pretending it was a real gun. You go home and get jobs. Go home and see your mothers. You're messing around here. Anyway, this gang of teenagers didn't take too kindly to this advice, let's put it that way. And were about to beat her up, basically. And luckily, a neighbour saw this and called the police. And mum kicked off in the police station, and she was difficult and violent. She's incredibly strong. For a little woman of 5'1", she had the strength of an egg. She was like the strength of an ox. She kicked off with them, effing and blinding and shouting, screaming, and went into an episode. So she was arrested and sectioned properly because she was now a danger to herself. And if she's going out with a toy gun threatening teenagers, then, probably best that she's treated properly. So it was always, I would always say to my mum, look, mum, if you don't stop this messing around all the time, fed up with having to come down and rescue you, you're going to end up being arrested, put in a flipping mental asylum, and the lock will be looked on the door. You won't be able to go anywhere, and you'll end up with people with mental health issues, mum. For God's sake, why don't you behave yourself? Anyway, that's exactly what happened. So I then realised, gosh, she needs this because she's now with people who understand her. She's being given the care and attention and understanding that she needs. She doesn't need rescuing. She needs understanding. And it was this amazing turning point. And I was kept away for a few weeks. They said, you mustn't come and see her. You mustn't, because she'll just associate with you with escaping. And she must get used to where she is. So that was like torture. Oh, I want to see my mum. Anyway, so I went down and had a long chat with her, and she was off, talk about cats and cheese sandwiches and ukuleles and all sorts of things. I say, Mum, I want to just get you to focus on something just for a minute, just literally 60 seconds. Oh, yes. Oh, I like your top. Yes, Mum. Just focus. Okay. She's like, little girl, all right, I'm focusing. I said, Mum, it's not until you were here in this lovely home that I could understand quite how ill you've been and how you were coping with so many issues. And she looked and she got a bit, teary-eyed. I said, look, Mum, I just want you to know that I think you're amazing, considering what you've been through. She said, oh, I've been a terrible mother to you. I said, no, Mum, you haven't. You really haven't. Look at me. Look at me. Today is the day that's important. People don't run away in horror when they see me. I have lots of friends. I have a lovely husband. My job is good. My health is good. I love you. I know you love me. What better job could a mother have done? And it clocked. She just, oh, I suppose I had never thought of it like that. So, well, I just want to say I love you and I love everything about you. No matter what's gone on in the past, it's all part of what's made us here today in this room. And she was emotional. She smiled, and then she was off again talking about ukuleles and cheese sandwiches, of course. But that moment logged, and I know it absolutely resonated with her. And after that point, literally from that conversation on, we laughed, we talked about her history. There seemed to be no barriers anymore, and nothing was hidden. She was open. She told me about things about her young life I'd never heard before. It was amazing. And I would call that moment was the transformation moment. And I'd encourage people to try and have those conversations with a tricky parent because really, unless you're, on your deathbed and you can't move, if you're able to have a conversation with your parent, you're able to tell them that you love them and understand how much they love you. And that's what keeps us going, isn't it? Because there are.
Having the opportunity to do that, I think, is so important because, as you said, you can't do it when they're gone.
Exactly. And
You
when you sort of actually, funnily enough, I say to people, your parent might not be there anymore to have that one-to-one conversation with, but you could write a letter. Like you could actually go out and walk around the park and have that conversation in your mind because you would know their reaction. And who knows, if it transforms something in you, then why not have that conversation? Because after all, memories of the person aren't always because they're literally in the room with you, touching and holding your face. Memories of a person, even if they're still alive, they are in another place. And so, does it matter that they might have passed away? You can still have those conversations. A couple of friends of mine have done that, and they've said it found it really, really helpful. Just brought a bit of peace.
this this is why I'm loving this conversation, is because I'm finding out so many different things and so many things that I didn't realize, and I know that you've looked into this in so much detail, and as you said, you've become trained yourself in these things. You immersed yourself in this, and you mentioned a few different approaches. Hypnotherapy, I believe, is it? Neuro-linguistic programming was another, and cognitive behavioral therapy. Have I got that right?
Yes, you have. Well done. Yeah, NLP, neuro program. That's about That's about basically communicating in a way that makes everything feel more positive and energizing. So, when people say, "Have you?" and they go, "Not bad," you go, "Not bad." Two negatives in there. How about saying, "I'm feeling really well"? Oh yeah, that sounds better. And then and hypnotherapy basically is about connecting your subconscious brain, the one that trips you up, the one that causes all the patterns and the behaviors and the phobias and the fears and the anxiety and the stress, is allowing that to calm down, the part that runs that, which is the automatic primitive brain. Let that calm down a bit and then bring in some new thinking, new thoughts, positive actions for the future, and then get those two to work together. And again, that's all based on realigning your thinking, because that's what I've had to do my whole life with my mum. So doing it in a professional way now just feels so empowering. It's brilliant.
Well, I was going to ask you, Sonia, but you had such a successful career as a producer with the BBC, and that chaos which you mentioned in your growing up. Do you think that throughout your life that that prepared you in some way for the stress of your job?
Absolutely. I loved live broadcasting. I absolutely loved it. And all my colleagues were like, "Oh, live broadcasting, it's much easier to go in the studio and record and be able to edit." I went, "No, live's great." And I loved it. And I often thought, why do I love that so much? And I like performing and playing music and stuff like that. So art is because I became very skilled from a very little girl to be able to cope with pretty much any situation and make it okay. And be able to very quickly come up with a solution to things because I had to. So therefore, that whole concept of being able to control something quickly without having to worry too much about planning changes, was a skill. Um, and also because my mum was so creative, I've got to, I mean, I have to say, I'm probably a little bit neurodiverse myself in the, when the ADHD thing, I need to find that because I'm forever thinking of something new. And my husband saying, no, focus, focus, don't think about that. Come back, focus. I'm thinking, oh yeah, but that's the creativity, isn't it? Because when you're in a creative industry, you don't want to be doing the stuff that's been going on forever anyway. You want something new. So yes, absolutely. And Mum never let us have a telly, so I didn't have a telly till I was 14, which made me very good at making up games and entertaining people and all that stuff. So of course, when I then went into radio and television, I was really good at making stuff up, which meant I was quite good at coming up with new ideas and stuff. So absolutely, what felt like a sort of punishment when I was little. Everyone else has got a telly. Why can't I have a telly? Actually, not having a telly gave me the skills to work very well in telly. Thanks.
I hope you don't mind me bringing this up, but I know that you've had a challenge in your personal life in 2023, and thankfully you're making good progress, if I can put it that way. All of these pressures in life that obviously you've come across and other people come across from your research, what would you say is the best way to cope with these things?
Oh well, I think. I mean, I had a breakdown. I must admit, when just before I got diagnosed with leukemia. And I'd lost 5 people in my life, and then my dad died very suddenly. And I was on my way back from a double funeral when I heard that my dad had died. So that's it. My brain just went, that's it, enough, enough. And I was a zombie basically. And I knew it was stress and anxiety that had done that. And I got unwell, and I knew I was going to get unwell. Anyway, I had a chromosomal abnormality anyway, apparently, a leukemia, but the leukemia kicks in, the body goes down and the chromosome goes, oh, hello, my turn. So it was touch and go. Yeah, it was horrible, actually. But I think the thing with all of that was I can understand. I thought, you know what, my body's just given up and my brain's given up, and I understand why. It has to. It's protecting itself in a way, like my mum was trying to protect me with all the strange stuff going on, but it was protection at its heart. And I would say the most important thing is just to ease up on yourself and breathe and take the minute by minute, think of a clock ticking, the ticks of the clock. The space in between the ticks is where we are. That's the space in between the tick. The tick is just telling you that another second's gone past. But the space in between the ticks is where we truly exist. And I think to say to people, just take time to think of where you are now, what's in front of you, who's around you, what's going on in your body. If your brain is going nuts and round in circles, just breathe and think, this is going to pass. And it will pass because there'll be another tick, and you'll be on to the next moment. So living very much in the present, I think, is super important. Pay attention to the past, but don't make it your reason. That's your context, but it's not your reason. Your reason is now and moving forward, what you do next.
Sonny, if we can bring things sort of background, if you could speak to your mum today, if you could sit her down and have a conversation with all that you've learnt, what would you say to her?
I would say to her, Mum, have you heard the podcast? And I'd say, have you heard the Mumbelievable podcast? And she'll say, no. And I say, well, it's because of you this has happened. And because of all the amazing things you've done, funny, difficult, tricky, loving, supportive, destructive, all of those things. This is helping so many people. And in your life, you tried to help people all the time. And now you might have helped a child who didn't have someone to cook dinner for them. You're now helping hundreds and thousands of people understand where they are. And it's all down to you because you made me and I'm making this. And that's you that's done that. And she would laugh, but I know she'd understand. And then she'd talk about ukuleles again, and that's fine.
Sonia, that's beautiful. That really is. Before we go, Mumbelievable, where can people find the podcast? That's the most important thing.
Most important thing, well, they always say this, or wherever you get your podcast, it's everywhere basically. It's on Spotify, it's on iTunes, it's on Acast. If you just put into any search engine, Mumbelievable with Sonia Beldom, it'll be there. You don't even have to put my name in, just Mumbelievable podcast. And also, if you go on the original website, which is soniasmum.com, which was the original reason why the podcast came out, there's a link to it on there as well. And then you also get all the old blogs and all the funny stories if you'd rather read them than hear them. So
I've been looking at them. I can vouch for that.
yeah, lovely. Oh, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, Tim. It really has. And thank you because you've made me relive some of the fabulous stuff that my mum did and went through. But also it's been challenging emotionally as well because, you get emotional talking about these things. And I don't think that's anything to be scared of. I think, emotion is just a bit of you. And it's been an absolute joy talking to you. You ask all the right questions. Thank you.
Oh, God, I don't know about that, but it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you as well. I've learned so much and I've felt emotional speaking to you. Thank you for being such a great guest on TPTV.
Thank you so much.